Welcome, guys, back to the I Love Wrestling podcast. I'm your host, as always, Justin Woolwine, and today we're welcome with Sean Evans. How we doing, man?
Doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm excited. Very glad to have you on here. Like I said off air, we made this happen, even though I had some mishaps this earlier this week. So thank you for working with me.
Not a problem. Life be life, and you know what I mean? So you just got to keep rolling with the punches. It's like one thing that Big Con told me was like, just let things happen the way they do, and it just gets easier instead of just fighting it or trying to go against the grain, just like let it happen. Be like, this is where we're at now.
I like it. I like it. It's an easy philosophy to go through with life. It just makes it much more easy than instead of going against the grain to maybe go with it sometimes. I mean, obviously, there's going to be times you got to ruffle some feathers, but
Yeah,
you don't have to.
you
It
don't
makes
have to. It's
things
just so
easier.
much easier.
Agreed. Agreed. Before we dive into your career and all the fun stuff surrounding yourself and your character and things like that, would you like to shout out your social medias and even upcoming events just to let fans know where they can catch you?
You can find me on Facebook, Sean Evans. You can find me. I also run Face Kicked Apparel. If you're looking for merchandise or anything, cheap plug here. I'm also on Instagram under Sean Evans 2025. Uh, the next show I'm at, I don't even know what the next show I'm at is. I've had a month off, so like my brain has not been in wrestling mode,
Okay.
so to speak.
It happens.
Actually, I don't really have anything until October again, so that's fun. I'll be at NWA Crossfire. I'm going to their Black Harvest show down in Sevierville, Tennessee, October 3rd and 4th. So that'll be fun.
I've heard a lot of good things about Crossfire. I recently had Evan Golden on here. He does a lot of work down there, and he was telling me it's definitely a promotion to check out if you're looking for territories within the NWA.
It's like really fun to see like NWA, like Exodus, and then trying to think like JCG Productions. Was that was Kazana show down there? And
Okay,
then I like the Raw and SmackDown. I would compare them to, but then you got Crossfire that's like ECW. So you get like a nice mix of everything.
I like it. So it's different brands under the same umbrella, kind of.
Yeah, it's like if you were going to compare it to anything, and that's what AJ kind of explained to me too. Like he's like, we're like SmackDown, Exodus is like Raw, but like Crossfire is like ECW, and like I started watching them, I was like, yeah, I can see it. Like Crossfire is a little edgier, which is fun.
So, like being able to work or and go to different shows under the NWA umbrella, is it are they structured the same, like being under that NWA umbrella, or does the NWA allow them to have free reign to kind of do what they need to make their territory work?
I don't know how to answer that because I've only worked for Exodus and for Crossfire a few
Okay.
times. They're two very different shows, but like they run very well, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So like I've done extra work for NWA before, so like it's all kind of similar,
Okay.
but it's
That
just
makes
like
sense.
just the branding, like Exodus is very old school kind of feel, very wrestling, very, but Crossfire is more in your face. We did a showdown there. There was a casket match, there was a dog collar match, all in the same show, like all this crazy's going on. Crossfire's got this big cult gimmick that's pretty fun to watch, you know, and they find a way to hook you to keep coming back, which both do very well, but like they're so different. They're very different from they're not they're run very well, but very different style.
Okay. Okay. I like it.
That made sense.
Yeah. You so typically here on the podcast, I try to start at like the beginning of our fandom because to be in this sport or to be involved around this sport, you got to be a fan of it. So Sean, when did you find professional wrestling?
Oh man, God, I had been like 4 or 5, and I saw Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior on the TV, and I was like, "What is this?" So I'm watching it, and then we didn't have cable for a very long time, until we got it back, probably like Attitude Era.
Okay.
And then I turn it on, The Rock comes out, and I'm like, okay, who's this guy? You know, and like, so I'm like pretty like unknowing of what any of these characters are. So okay, he's caught my attention, and then my buddy got the King of the Ring where Shane McMahon and Kurt Angle wrestled,
Mm-hmm.
and they were trying to go through the glass pane, and it didn't work forever. Then that's when I was like, this is it, this is awesome, you know, and I was hooked ever since then. You know, so I just watched it as much as I could.
What would you say like about pro wrestling drew you in or made you fall in love with it?
I think it's the athleticism. You start watching these guys. Like first, it's the colors and the characters, but then like you got in the early 2000s, late 90s, and it was like everything was kind of grungy, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and everybody like was either it wasn't like traditional tights and singlets, you know, like they kind of looked like people, and it was a little bit more rough. Like when ECW started sliding in and all that, so it was like, okay, this is different. This is different. Oh man, what did I just watch? I just watched this guy get tossed off a Hell in a Cell cage. You know, like what is going on? So it's like, and then watching these guys get back up and keep going, it's like, okay, now you got my interest. Now I can see how this is going to play out. You know, so I'd say it's the athleticism for me that made me fall in love with it. Like, how can you do all that? You know,
So who would you say like are some of your favorites or biggest inspirations while you was growing up?
I was always a Triple H guy. He was always my favorite. Like everybody was like The Rock and everybody's Stone Cold, but I was always forever Triple H. Like I, it was the DX version when he came out with that, you know, and then just watching him do a solo run after that, and then that's when I started. And then after that, you know, like later on, I'd say it would be like Edge when he started like diving into the rated R superstar stuff.
Okay. I like it. You know, I'll be honest, I think you might be the first guy on here to say Triple H. So in
Yeah,
152 episodes, I'm pretty for sure you're the first guy to say Triple H. Because usually you do get that Rock or Austin. I've heard a lot of Jeff Hardy or John Cena. Triple H, I think, is one of those guys that should probably get more credit for what he's done. And I think sometimes you get the people that are of the opinion, well, he runs it now, or he married the boss's daughter. But realistically, Triple H was one of the greatest of all time to ever step foot in a ring.
I
And
think so too. Yeah.
on the microphone, I remember even as a kid just putting on like leather jackets and pretending to be Triple H and hitting my brothers with pedigrees and stuff. So
How
like
many times you like drink water and you're spitting it out, you know, everywhere. You
it's
know,
it's almost like an instinct when you get a bottle of water as a wrestling fan to want to spit it in the air. um, growing up, did you ever have a time where you got out of wrestling? Like I know a lot of wrestling fans have that moment when they maybe become teenagers or something. They get distracted by girls and school and sports. Was that ever you?
no, like I said, like we shut our cable off when I was young, so that'd probably be the time frame. But like right around 14 to now, I'm gonna be 38 next week. You know, I've been hooked ever since.
Okay. Happy
So
birthday, by the way.
thank you.
Um, so like was the plan for you always to become a professional wrestler or did you have a plan B?
When No Mercy came out, I played the crap out of that game, you know, and I told my dad, I was like, I'm gonna be a pro wrestler. This is what I want to do. And he's like, oh, but you know, you could get hurt and this, that, paralyzed, you can never walk in. I was like, this is what I want to do. I think this is it. But like around here, I'm from Michigan, so like at the time there was only one pro wrestling school, and it was down in Detroit. It was House of Truth, and which is a great school. It's awesome. It's now called Grind Time Wrestling, and but it was like for me at that age was not affordable because I had to be. It was like a 2 hour drive one way. It was so much up front, you know, and I was still in high school, so I'm like, I can't afford that, you know, or do that because I'm in school, you know. But then I found Pure Pro, and that was a little bit more closer. That's my home base, Pure Pro Wrestling out of Flint, Michigan. And I found them through a mutual friend, and a bunch of us went and got trained. It was like me, Rohi Raju, um, trying to think if there's any others of us wrestling still. A lot of the guys in my class are gone now because I've been doing this 16 years now. So like, there's very few of us left. And a guy named George Mack that runs Capital Pro here in Michigan. I think we're the three left. But
So
yeah,
is
I found what's that?
sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, we found Pure Pro, and like I haven't looked back since.
Was there like ever a moment or a moment in time where you decided like that moment made you decide, hey, I'm going to take this leap from being a fan and go start training?
Yeah, so just like anybody else, we all backyard wrestled, and uh, the guys I mentioned, we were all in this little backyard group in Saginaw, Michigan, and when we got approached by one of the other guys, like, hey, we know a school that you guys could go to if you want to do it for real, like I was like, yeah, sign me up, let's go. I was all ready to go, and the other guys that were in that group were like, yeah, nah, we were just doing it for fun. We wrestled in a 12 by 12 ring in a backyard, just for fun. But like a few of us, I think at the time, 5 of us went, but only 3 of us lasted. And uh, and then like there's been thousands of times where I wanted to quit. Thousands. Like I was almost so close to like graduating from the school and wanted to quit. Because whatever. But I just kept going, and then it was like I couldn't stop, even no matter how mad or angry or whatever was going on in my personal. I'm like, I gotta keep going. As much as I do not like this right now, I gotta keep going.
What did the training process look like for you? Was you in training for, a couple months before you started like actually having matches, or was you in there for a year and some change? I know some guys take their time and other guys rush right into it. What did that look like for you?
For us, I think we started getting our first matches. We were probably about like 3 or 4 months in, and we
Okay.
trained every week. We trained every Thursday for 4 hours straight,
Hmm.
and then during shows we practice a little bit before whatever. And once Xavier found like us, all right, you guys can pass in a match. If you're guided by a vet. Then he threw us in there in the wolves. We found out if we could hang or not, and if we couldn't, then all right, maybe we'll like bench you for a little bit, or we'll throw you back in there. But yeah, I'd say it was like just a couple months. And then yeah, he cleared us. I think it took us 8 or 9 months to clear us, and then we hit the ground running after that.
You made your debut, I believe, in 2009, correct?
Yep.
What did it look like for you trying to make a name for yourself on the independent scene back then?
Man, back then was rough because like uh if this is just my opinion, but like if you weren't like this guy or this guy's guy, you know what I mean? Like it was harder for you to get on shows,
Makes
or
sense.
they
Yeah.
wouldn't give you, a shot. They look at you, go, oh, you're trained by that guy, then just pass you off. Um, but it was like back then, like the wrestling was different than it is now. It was more old school in '09. Um, but and then like TNA was starting to become kind of big too, so some guys are starting to try to bring that style in.
I might have lost you.
I don't know if you heard anything I said,
I heard a
but
little
it was
bit.
like, yeah, it was like, so it was a weird transformation period because it's like all the old vets that are like on their way out the door, newer guys coming in. TNA was starting to become big, and Ring of Honor was starting to be a thing, and so everybody's trying to mimic that style of wrestling. And the older guys like, no, this is not how you do it. And like I did a greaser gimmick when I first started, so I didn't have traditional wrestling gear, so I always got laughed at because you're not a real professional wrestler. You don't got boots, you don't got tights, you don't got singlet, like everything was wrong. And but then shortly after that, WWE had a greaser tag team, and oh, it's cool now. So like wrestling was weird. Wrestling was very weird. It was a time where like you're just got stars in your eyes, and you want to do good, and you ask these vets like, hey, this is an actual conversation I have with the guy. Say, hey, did you watch my match? Yeah, I did. What did you think? What can I work on? How can I improve? It sucked. What sucked? The whole thing. Just you should just quit. I'm like, well, that's not helpful. You know what I mean? So
So
wrestling was a weird like all these guys that are a foot out of the business are so angry. Or the guys that their friends went off and got signed, but they got left behind, they're now, bitter. Like they don't want to help nobody. It was just a weird time when I started. Very strange.
being young and in the business around people like that, how did you maintain motivation to keep going?
Um, so it took me a long time to figure it out. Like I was one of the slow learners. And once I started like figuring it out, instead of going to shows and stuff, I just kept going to school. Just kept going like doing private lessons with my coach. And he would just pound this stuff in my brain. That was what was motivating me to keep going was okay, I'm going to invest more into me and not worry about going to these shows right now. So that way I don't look like a dork when I'm in this ring anymore. You know what I mean? And then once I started to get it and it started showing in my matches, and then those guys that said I sucked are like, oh, we see improvements. Okay, now we'll help you. Then the motivation and the payoff was starting to come in there.
Earlier you brought up PPW. How important is that promotion uh, been to your career overall?
It's been there since I was the second class. I was the second class that he ever trained. So like I've been with it from it's ugly to now that it's blooming into something awesome. Like the shows they drew back then when I started, sometimes it'd be 4 people in the crowd, which was just trainees, or it'd be 20 people or whatever, like or wrestlers' wives and kids. But now, we just did a show back in I think it was April. It was at the Flint Door Arena, and we drew 2,000 people. I think it was 2,000 plus. So from going from 4 people to that 2,000 plus mark, like that, it's fun to watch, and it's grown from such a like just a whatever indie to now like being I think one of the more prominent ones in Michigan,
Hmm.
and people are trying to get there, trying to get in that door, but it's so hard to get in, because like he's got his guys. So like Pure Pro is a wrestling school. So like he uses all of his students. So like for outsiders, it's a little harder to get in. You know what I mean? Unless he actually has his eye on you. So he's already got all of his people.
Do you think as a product goes, it makes it easier to build talent because you literally build them from the ground up?
I think so, because then you can. I mean, I think it's the same thing as WWE when they were bringing in their Olympic people. Right now, you have no bad habits. You have no like indie-ness to you. You are just now a student, and then you could teach them your way. And then like Pure Pro has like 5 or 6 different coaches at that school too, so you're getting so much philosophy. So every wrestler that I watch, like these newer kids coming in, like they're all different, which is fun to see. Like, okay, these guys are way different than these guys, but we're all trained by the same people. Styles are different, and their psychology is a little different. Like they're starting to figure it out, like their way that what works. So I think building your own army as opposed to like trying to bring in talent elsewhere that you're like, oh yeah, I've seen a couple clips of you, and then bring them in, and then they're not what they seem online, maybe. I mean, but if you know these people from the ground up, then it's a little bit easier to build your show, I think.
So earlier we talked about how maybe you wasn't as welcome to a locker room as you should have been. What's it like now for you as a veteran being able to welcome these guys into the locker room and maybe being able to guide them down the right path instead of just being told, "Hey, you should quit."
I made it a point. Like there was a time I did a seminar, and the critique I got was, "You can't wrestle your dick out of your pants. Quit. Find a new hobby." And I was like, "Man, I do not ever want anybody to feel like that. Like that moment, like I just that crushed me, and that was one of my points where I was about to walk. And I once I started figuring it out, I was like, okay, when I get a little bit better, I'm gonna make sure that I invest as much time into people if they ask me. And like the one thing that drives me nuts is like I'm tired, I come through the curtain, I'm sweating, I'm beat up, probably hurt, and I got a line of dudes at the curtain like, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? Da, 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 da. You know, just like attacking me instead of like checking to see if I'm okay first, let me breathe, then come talk to me. So I always tell people like, hey, if you want me to watch your stuff, just ask me. I'll watch it and I'll give you my honest opinion. And I'm very transparent on what I see and what I liked and what I didn't like. And I give ideas of how to make what you did better. So that way maybe you can implement it later. And then same with like promos, when I get promos sent to me, I want to see people's actual I want to see them, not like a character, so to speak. You know, like you watch all these promos online as this promo voice. I'm gonna beat you up. I'm gonna do this, and on this day at XYZ promotion at XYZ Street at this VFW, and like just reading the flyer to you. Like, okay, let's make it you now. You know, so like I try to make it a point to help everybody in a way that I wasn't helped. Only if they come to me though. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to be that guy that like attacks.
Do you
So
think that encourages younger guys getting into this to come to you and try to ask for help and advice?
yeah, I have so many people now sending me like their matches, like, "Hey, can you watch this? Let me know what you think. Please be brutally honest. Hey, what do you think of my promo?" Like, I get like 3 or 4 matches a week sometimes, you know, and
Nice.
I'll tell them. Or if I'm at a show, like last night, I was at a show and a couple of the younger kids from our school were at the same show I was at, you know, and I watched it, you know, and they asked me, you know, I was like, "This is what I saw. You know, don't do that." Or, "Hey, I liked what you did." But they're coming to me because they know I'm not going to be that either that like, oh, you did great, you know, you're awesome, everything looked awesome, if they, you know, crap the bed. And I'm not going to be like, everything sucked, you know, go fly a kite, you know what I mean?
Um, throughout your career, you've been a part of a multitude of tag teams and groups. But one group that's kind of stayed together in different iterations throughout your career, at least for the last 9 or so years, is the Nomads. How did you guys come together to form that group?
That was an accident. The whole
Okay.
thing was so I just started doing a biker gimmick at the time, and we did a show in Holland, and he brought in CJ Anderson, who now wrestles as Anderson Knight. And we looked very similar. He was just 6'4" and probably had 60 pounds on me. But we were both bald. We were both kind of big, big beards. So, and he wore a leather vest. I had a leather vest. So I pulled him over to Joe, and I was like, "Hey," I was like, "We look alike." I was like, "Can we just tag?" And he looked at both of us. He's like, "Huh, yeah, let's try it. You know, what do you want to be called?" And at the time, Joe was calling me the Nomad A7s. And I was like, well, let's just be the Nomads. And he's like, okay. And then shortly after that, my brother Ryan, he could only manage because he was really hurt. He broke his neck early on, but he could talk. And I was like, well, let's bring Ryan in to talk for us. And he'd be like the I was the president. He was like the second in command. CJ was like the enforcer. And then Road Rash came in, who was now Eli Driftwood. He he was just happened to be at a show, and we were really good friends. And the promoter's like, hey, you know, like I'm gonna give him a shot. You know, he's been doing really good in class. You know, like have him come out with you. So all right, so he was my prospect. And then he morphed into Road Rash, who was kind of like an unhinged, like you didn't know what he was gonna do kind of guy. And then my tag partner before that, Mo Evans, my other brother, I just welcomed him in. I was like, you just come here. you come here. So then at the time when I don't know if you remember when they had all the killer clowns on the news and they were like stopping traffic and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we had Pickles the clown. He dressed up kind of grungy. He was a 400-pound guy at the time. 6'2". And I'm like, what's scarier right now than a fucking clown? You know what I mean?
Especially a
Everybody,
6 foot, 400 pound clown.
everybody's scared of clowns at that time. So we had him. He came in. We had Pinky Shortcake. She's a micro wrestler out of Tennessee. She came and was with us for a little bit, which was just another like happy accident. At a show, she turned on the. I was like picking on her. Me and Mo Evans were picking on her. The big baby face comes in to save her, but then during our match, she turned on him to help me win the title, or defend the title kind of thing. So then we had Billy Ray Daniels, who was another like a cowboy guy, and he was just similar style, but he was like very small, but he was like spunky. You know what I mean? He was like the Spitfire guy, like let me at him, and okay, I like this. Let's throw this all together. So like now I'm looking around, I was like, man, we're like 8 deep in here. And like the whole thing just happened to be happy accidents of how we got our whole team together. It just worked.
Like it. What would you say is your favorite tag team that you've been able to be a part of?
There's two. The Nomads was one of them. Three actually. There's three. The Nomads, I had so much fun. That was a lot of my growing period. That was like where I learned the most about tag wrestling, figuring out who I thought I was, but I also got to do it with all my best friends. So it made it extra special for me. And then more recently, I was in a tag team called the Saloon Slayers when I started doing the cowboy thing. A guy I wrestled with, Eddie Dillon, at Pure Pro. We had just a singles match, but we had, since we're so close, we had like a really kind of a banger, And the promoter's like, God, you guys have such good chemistry. You should just tag. I'm like, not another tag team. So I asked him, I was like, what do you think? He's like, okay, we'll do it, but I want to be a pirate. And I'm like, whatever, man. I don't. And it just kind of meshed well. It meshed like, cowboy, it was like cowboy is the cowboy of the land. Pirates is like a cowboy of the sea, and we shot all of our promos kind of like cinematic style at a bar, and like just like vintage yellow color. And we always talked about how we're riding on his boat to all these shows.
That's fun.
And like a lot of our promos, like, you get all right, it's gonna be you guys versus Midwest Misfits. I was like, okay, so we have no story. Let's make something up. So we printed off wanted posters of their heads on it, with a reward, we're looking for them. And then one time, what else were we doing? One time I was talking about a match at Fight Night. I was wrestling like Miles Jacobs and Ashton Day at that time. And I come in and Eddie Dillon's talking about one of his sea stories to the bartender. So like it's always like some sort of weird like Grand Theft Auto style vignette that's going on in all these promos. There's one we did. It was called Fellowship of the Ring, and this promotion was putting on like this big show to help like get startup money to get their ring and whatever. So like Fellowship of the Ring, so we did everything like Lord of the Rings style in this promo. It's just us walking through the woods and doing weird stuff, looking at like in Bay City they have like actual cannons and stuff, like statues. So we're like looking on the inside of these things and like, is this it? Is this it? And in Bay City by the water, they have like what's called the Fellowship Shell, and it has like a big ring next to the water. Like that's gotta be it. Like we just made stuff up, but in doing so, in our dumbassery, we got booked a lot doing this. And then last night I was in a way different tag team. It's called Straight Out of Saginaw. It's me, Nick Green, and Ray Larson, and we're kind of like the 90s kids. So it's like something totally different, which is I like because it's not something I normally do. And I wrestle a different like style than I normally would. So it challenges me to be different.
You bring up Ray Larson. I've had the pleasure of having her on the podcast. What's it like working with her?
So I feel like big brother with her because like I've been there since the beginning. Like her start, when she started training, um, and then she blew her knee out, and then her questioning if she want to keep coming and going. I was like, you gotta keep doing it, just see what happens. She comes back and like more in shape. She's always been in great shape, so she's more in shape now after her surgery. After her surgery. Then she's talking about going to Can-Am to train, so I pushed her to do that. But it's been fun watching her. She's one of the ones that always asks me to watch her. And hey, what can I do better? What can I do? So watching her like kind of blossom from a baby to like now seeing her on these really bigger promotions has been really fun for me, and I'm really proud of her.
I know before we got on the program, you asked me how I came in touch with you, and I gave you the wrong information. It was actually Ray Larson. After you brought her name up, I have a list of, like, usually at the end of these, I'll ask you guys off camera who I should get in contact with, and you was one of four names she gave.
Oh
So
wow. Shout
I
out.
uh I wrote down Ace Evans instead of Sean Evans and didn't put two together until just now. So it was Ray.
Yeah, she still calls me Ace. Like I've been Ace for 16 years, and I just recently changed it because now in this area there's so many Ace somethings or Ace of something. Like I work for IWR, which is Rhino's promotion, and Ace Austin works there too. So you got Ace
Mhm.
Austin, you got Ace Evans. Just south of us, we got Ace Perry. There's another guy in Michigan named Ace Velasquez. Like Ace Romeo or whatever. It's just like all these aces or the ace of somethings. We all have like some sort of ace logo too, or some. I'm like, okay, something's got to give. And then once the Saloon Slayers that tag team fizzled out, I wanted to really reinvent everything I was doing. So I changed my name, which is something I've been thinking about for a long time anyway. I just never pulled the trigger. And then uh, I changed like the vibe of my character and how I react to things and how my character would be if he was a real life person. I'm trying to bring him more as a real, as opposed to, well, I'm just dressing up as this for fun.
Yeah. To bring some more realism and maybe even credibility to the character.
Yeah,
Okay. You brought up IWR. How did you get brought in there, and like what's your experience been like being able to work underneath somebody like Rhino?
that was a fun one. I was because I make merchandise, like I said. So I was going to that show just because my buddy Drag King Logan was on there, and he was like, a big deal in Detroit. And I would go just to watch his matches because he was wrestling the names they were bringing, and they were, he was getting to do fun stuff with them. So I was like, I gotta watch that match. I gotta watch that match. So I'm bringing guys merchandise with me too. And then Gary, the promoter, he's like, "Oh, you do merchandise?" So I started making their stuff now. And then one of their shows, they needed somebody to put over one of their guys in like 60 seconds. And Ryan was like, "Man, who do we got?" And Dread King Logan and Kyle Barrett both pointed at me. They're like, "He can do it," you know. And they're like, "Okay, you literally have 60 seconds." All right, I can do that. And ever since then, they've been happy with what I did. Um, it's been fun working there because like I'm meeting like the next level guys, and I get to pick their brains and I get to learn from them, and I get to wrestle some of them sometimes. So like I get to learn. It's one of those shows like now I get to learn from somebody as opposed to me having to teach to somebody. So nothing wrong with teaching. I love being able to teach, but like if I can learn something out of it, then I can grow more.
I've been fortunate to go to two IWR shows. Um, I live in the Chicago area, so it's not the easiest thing to make it all the way to Detroit, but it's possible. I was able to make it to WrestleFest. They just had, I believe, in May, and then their March show. I don't remember what the March show was called because I'm terrible with names. But uh, I, the thing I really like about IWR is their ability to kind of give you an ECW vibe, but also be able to have their focus even towards the children in the audience instead of just that edginess that an adult's gonna like. So you get the best of both worlds. And as a pure fan of professional wrestling, it's a good mix of that extreme and the family wholesome uh, fun that we all like and enjoy when it comes to our wrestling.
I think
Um,
that's what I appreciate about it too. Like I go to a lot of these shows, and like some of them, like last night, I was at Super Shogun Wrestling up in West Branch, and like it's different. Like it's more character based. It's more like kid friendly. But last night was like their WrestleMania. It was Samurai Slam. But they had blood and guts. They had cage matches. They had like everything was like kind of over the top. Whereas like yeah, you're kid friendly most of the time. Like that, I'm like, I don't know if I want to bring my, I got little ones myself, so I'm like, I couldn't bring my kids to that one. IWR is a little bit more, like you said, like kids can watch it and not get freaked out. You're not gonna see blood and guts and stuff.
and just the interaction between the fans, and I think my favorite part honestly about going there is Johnny Bravo and his connection, the Canadian group that they have up there. The heat that
A
they
team.
get is amazing, and I just, it's so organic. And I think uh like when I went to WrestleFest, they did the little spot with Kurt Angle, which the kids in the crowd loved it so much. And like I'm at the point, like I'm 25, so like I'm at the point now where I get enjoyment out of watching younger people get enjoyment out of wrestling. Like that, I just love watching the kid in the front row get super excited to see these guys and girls in the ring. So like seeing some like a 5, 6, 7, 8 year old kid watching Kurt Angle beat up these guys because they're Canadian was, and just get the reaction. I don't necessarily know if you get that everywhere, and it's just exciting. And the way Rhino and Gary and those guys are able to capture that is something that like sometimes I feel like a lot of indie shows are missing.
I think so too, because like I think a lot of people, this is just my opinion, they don't think of what like what's gonna make the kids care, because the kids are the ones that bring their parents bring them, the parents bring money, right? So that's how we make money. But if you're wrestling either for A, yourself, or B, to pop the boys, or C, like what would be cool, as opposed to what will a 5-year-old understand, you know what I mean? Or the very first time viewer of, I don't know what wrestling is, my friend just happened to bring me here today. What's gonna make them want to come back? And if you look in the crowd and it's mostly kids, and you go out there and wrestle a style that they don't get or understand, then they ain't gonna come back.
Exactly.
That's why like I really enjoy wrestling at like festivals and fairs and stuff, because like you're kind of introducing the crowd to what wrestling is. You're kind of like, most people know what it is, but you have to assume like that nobody knows who we are, obviously, but like maybe they never seen wrestling live before. So now we have to teach them how to be a fan and teach them how to, I'm the bad guy. I want you to boo me. This is the good guy. I want you to, when he's beating me up, I want you to cheer. And when the finish happens, I want you to explode. But if you're doing stuff above that level of understanding, people aren't going to get it, and they're just going to walk off, or they won't come back, or whatever.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I've learned is like being a wrestling fan. There's obviously a lot of people on the outside that look at it and they think it's weird or it's silly or they don't understand it because you just watch it on TV, and watching it on TV or in clips, you're never going to really understand what is going on. And I always tell people like hold your judgment on wrestling until you go to an event because it'll change your mind. Because live wrestling is so much different than what you're going to see on TV. And like for example, like my step siblings, they watch some wrestling, like, because me and my dad and my brothers do, but they're not pulling it up to watch it. And but we went to an indie show and it was all lucha libre, and they watched it and they instantly were hooked. They couldn't take their eyes off it the whole time. And afterwards they get all the autographs from everybody and they're like, we want to come back. And at the end we're like, I thought you didn't like it. And they're like, no, we want to come back. And then even recently, my fiance is the biggest non-wrestling person you could think of. But I recently did a sponsorship with Exodus Pro Wrestling, and we went out to Cleveland to watch it, and I brought her with. And she won't ever tell me this, but she was hooked the whole time. Couldn't take her eyes off of it, commenting on everything. She make fun of them probably, but she's having fun. And afterwards, I just looked at her and was like, "I told you so." And she just gave me that, "No, no, you didn't. I don't like it." Blah blah blah. I'm like, "You're full of shit."
Yep. Yeah. I had a match there, and I brought my wife with me, and I was like, this would be way different than what you're normal seeing me at, and she watched it. She's a fan, but she's like, doesn't turn it on, but if I'm watching it, she'll watch, kind of thing. And she's watching it on the way home. She's like, that was so much different than what I'm used to. I was like, right. It's like watching TV, right? But like right there, you go to some of these shows and it's just like, what am I watching? But like Exodus, like I hold that one. Like I trained with EC3 for quite a while. Is that 2 years ago now? So like watching that show, where it started and where it's at now is like it's been like fun.
What was your first interaction like with EC3?
I met him up at UPW up in the UP in Michigan. He was doing a seminar, like a CYN seminar, and that's right when the CYN like vignettes were coming out and all that stuff, and he was doing like the cinematic matches and all that. And I was like, oh, this is actually really cool. Like I really liked it. Like they had the narrator talking through the whole match. They had, black and white, the guys on the outside of the ring watching like a fight club. Like his promos hooked me. I'm like, this is dope. And then like I had the chance to meet him. So then I went to that seminar and I met him. He's a super nice guy. He's always been really cool to me. Even after that, the times I met him before I trained with him, and that was really neat. Like just meeting him, and then like he watched my match, and he's the type of guy that will dissect your match from beginning to end for about half hour. And he'll question, why'd you do this here? Why'd you do this here? To make you really think about what you're doing. Because with him, everything's with intent. You have to do everything intentional. And if you don't, then it looks either stupid or it doesn't make sense. So go into every part of your match with intent. So he like really made me think. And then I met him. We did a NWA tryout down at School of Morton, and he was one of the guys there. And we got thrown into a 10-man or 10-man tag 5-on-5. And that match was not very good at all. But he pulled me aside. He's like, hey, like keep working at this. I've seen, progression from you. He's like, keep at it. And then when he did the very first preface in Cleveland, I went to that. And they had like in-ring stuff with Matt Roby. We did like a Q&A with him. We did like a promo dissection, like what's the difference between this kind of promo. We did, and then they picked guys to do a match at the end. And I was one of the guys. They did another 10-man tag. I'm like, oh my God, all these people, and I didn't know most of them. So, all right, well, let's figure it out, and they called me the next week and they're like, hey, we really want you to come to our school. You were one of the top three people that we were looking at. We want you to come. So I was like, all right. And before I even left the video call, I came out of the office and my wife's already standing there. She goes, you're going. She's like, I already figured it out. You're going. And she was pregnant at the time. I'm like, are you sure? Like we're about to have our youngest like soon, and she's like, it's fine. We'll figure it out. So I went down there and I lived with Preston Riker, guy that runs Custom Evolution. He
Mhm.
makes all the action figures. I don't know if you've seen those, but they're pretty dope.
I've
True
bought some.
wrestling. Have you seen them?
Yeah, I got the Conga Kong.
Yeah. So I was living with him for a while, so I could commute from his house to the training, 3 times a week. And then they lost that school, and so I'm just trying to get back down there, really. But he's always been really nice to me. And then um, I started getting booked out elsewhere, and then we hadn't seen each other in a while, and I just seen him at Fight Night Wrestling at the beginning of this month. He was at that show, and uh, that interaction was a lot better than the last one. Like I knew, I'm not saying anything that he wouldn't be mad about, but the last time I wrestled for him, I didn't know what my character was. I didn't know what I was doing, and they're pitching these ideas to me, and I'm like, I was fighting it when I should have just kind of rolled with it. Like I
Mhm.
said earlier, I should have just rolled with it. I was fighting it. No, I want to do this. I want to do this, and it didn't work. And the last thing he said to me was like, "You're not over. I don't know what to do with you. Figure it out. And I was like, that was another moment where I was like, man, should I just quit? I was just like, I've already been doing this long, and I'm not doing what I should be doing. I'm not catching attention. But then when I saw him at the beginning of the month, um, he was like super happy. He's like, dude, he's like, it was good to see you. He's like, I'm proud of you. That match was pretty good. He's like, I was happy with it because I went to him. And he's like, it was good. He's like, I can nitpick it all day, but it was a good match. I did the bar fight with Miles Jacobs.
Okay.
So we had all a bunch of beer bottles and glass spots and stupid stuff. And so it was a little different than what I'm normally used to, but he watched it, from start to finish. And he was telling me how much he was proud of me. And that made me feel a little bit better, you know? But I also knew that him yelling at me was his big brother way of pushing me to try better.
Definitely. And earlier you brought up how like he will pick apart what your match is and he'll give you advice. And I've been fortunate to have him on the podcast once, and that he even did it for me. Like after the podcast, afterwards, gave me you need to fix, like if you're gonna be successful with this kid, you need to fix this, this, and this, and you did this, this, and this right. Kind of gave me the compliment sandwich, so to speak,
Yeah,
which was really cool because I mean, seeing somebody like EC3 and even hearing all the things that are said about um, you like it's easy to have an opinion going into the conversation and thinking it's going to go one way, and EC3 is one of those guys that'll make you by the end of that conversation have a completely different opinion of him, and it's a good one, which is like and somebody like him, I think it's just cool to see him care so much, even at the smallest level up to the highest level, because you don't get that with everybody, especially with people that's had success in wrestling or even in anything. A lot of times, them giving the guys at the bottom just advice or even the time of day is rare. And EC3 is one of those people that makes sure to give everybody that if he can. And I really enjoy that about working with him and just being able to uh, have the experience to talk to him, if that makes sense.
yeah, it does. He wants everybody to be better than what they are, and he wants them to be the best version of themselves. That's what he always says. He says, "I want you to be the best you. I want you to be, the best version. And if I can help you get there, I don't know how, but if there's something I can do, I'll figure it out." And he's always been like that with me because, at the time when I was at CYN, it was all the kind of the local guys in Ohio were there, and then I was commuting from Michigan there with a newborn now at the time. So he's like, dude, I respect what you're doing. He's like, you're really trying. He's like, I am grateful that you're putting your trust in me and my team to, make you better. And, well, something has to give because I'm just kind of the definition of insanity, right? You know, like I'm just kind of doing the same thing, hoping for something different. And I'm like wondering why I'm still where I'm at, you know. So I need to do something different. And that was what I did.
Bringing that up, we've mentioned how like you're a 16-year veteran of pro wrestling. What's it been like for you to try to figure out how to evolve your character throughout the years?
Um, so, oh man, all the gimmicks I've had. I was Sugar Sean Ray, and at the time I was 250 pounds. I had a comb over, and I thought I was HBK, and I definitely was not. And then I it switched that to Ace Evans, and I was the greaser. And then I was doing a show in Indiana called RCW, and they had a guy there named Jaron Skalka. He was the Polish heartthrob, and he was a good shape, good looking dude. And I was like, oh, we should do a tag team. And I could do my Shawn Michaels thing here, right? You know, and I brought back the gimmick, you know, and we were called Hot and Dangerous. And that didn't last very long. He ended up getting injured and having to have surgery, and then he never came back. But like, it was fun while it happened. So like, I'm doing like this like kind of sexy boy stripper thing down there, and then I started when he got hurt. I started teaming with Ken Dick, who wrestles as Great Akuma now, but he was wrestling as Ken Dick at the time, and we did that for a while, and then we kind of went our separate ways. He started doing Akuma. I started doing the biker thing after that, and then I was like, oh yeah, I could do this. And like my dad was a biker, you know, I grew up around the stuff, you know, I could do this, but like then Legion came in, which is Malice and Phil Monahan, and those two are 6'4", 275, 280 pound dudes that look like bikers. I'm like, okay, well, I just look like a dork, you know, like I don't look scary compared to these two dudes, you know, like okay, cool. But I think like working with Road Rash, Eli Driftwood, he was my promo coach. Like he trained way early on with Dan Severn, and then he had a child and disappeared to be dad. And then he came back and trained with us, but he was always a character. He always had some sort of idea for like some, whether it was like serious or some super kooky or whatever. Like he was like, he knew how to bring character out of people. So like he was training me a lot how to not be just so vanilla. And then um, once I started doing what I'm doing now, with Saloon Slayers kind of like brought more of me, my personality into the character. The bartender in our promos is actually the video guy too, the producer. So like I always tell him like, hey, if something sounds stupid or if it sucked, be completely honest, you know, because I don't want to waste your time trying to make me look good. You know what I mean? And he'll tell me too. He's flat. He's like, no, do it again. That sucked. You know, like thank you. So like I've had so much influence with my circles of people that are so talented that could bring out more of me out, if that made sense.
Yeah, definitely. You brought up earlier the action figure thing. What's it like for you to be one of few guys on the independent scene having your own action figure?
That was wild. Like the
Yeah.
whole thing, like when Preston approached me, Preston, he's a great guy, and he's always got these like ambitions and like that are really like out there. You know, it's like he was always like modifying figures. He would like, you know, Frankenstein them or paint them in a different way. Like he's got so many. He's got a man cave of like he loves Matt Hardy. So if you listen to this, he's probably gonna laugh. But he's got like a whole wall of like almost all the Matt Hardy figures, I think. And some of them you could tell he modified himself to make them more current or whatever, and they look really cool. And he's like, I think I want to make an action figure. I was like, all right, we'll try it. You know, what's the worst that could happen? You know, and then he teamed up with his people that got him the 3D models and the files and told him what to get and how to do it. And then like when he started taking pictures, and then like he started sending me the pictures of what my head sculpt's gonna look like and what on the body, like the mock-ups. I was like, oh man, this is real. This is odd. Like my face is on an action figure, and I'm looking, I was like, okay, this is cool, and then like he surprised me. He brought me the completed in the box, the first one he ever did of me, and all the details he put, like all the gray in my beard and all the like the eyes. He hand paints the whole thing himself. Like he sits there for hours just painting all these pieces the same exact way every time. And I'm just looking at this thing, and it's got like my gear on it. It's got my logos on it. I'm just like, wow, this is nuts. And he goes, oh yeah, look at this, and it's got all my tattoos on it. And I'm like, this is wild. Like I never thought I'd have an action figure, like. And to be an indie guy that has an action figure that I can sell to people, like that's just never thought that would happen.
No. Well, and that's I brought up WrestleFest earlier, and I met Preston there. That I was going around talking to the different vendors and everything, just trying to get the podcast out there. And I saw the figures, and I'm a big figure guy. Like I'm actually in my man cave, so to speak, right now, surrounded with wrestling action figures. And I saw he had an EC3 prototype. He had the Kunga Kong. I believe yours was there, and he had his own, and maybe some others. Now that I'm thinking about it, but and he just goes on this pitch and tells me how they're made and everything. And like to me, I just thought it was the coolest concept because obviously AEW has their figures, WWE's had their figures forever, TNA's had them, but you don't see it on the independent level unless like some guy is taking a WWE or an AEW figure and modifying it and making a custom. And so to have a 3D printed version of yourself at the independent level, it's kind of like next level marketing because going back to like gearing towards kids, what more does a kid want than seeing this guy wrestle at an indie show and then saying, okay, now I can go buy his toy and I can have him fight John Cena or whoever else that I have in my collection. It's just got to be a fun feeling, especially I assume as a kid you probably had wrestling action figures, so now to have your own has to be insane.
Yeah, and like he's got he's made me like a couple different versions of myself. So like, all right, now I gotta have all of me, the different the different gimmicks of me. Now I gotta get this one. Now I gotta get this one, which is good. That's a good strategy for him because like if he has he had originally did one of him with the red and gold gear. Then he just did one with him in the blue and gold gear that he wears now. Smart. Now the kids are giving, oh, I need this one. I already have this one. Now I got to get this one of him. That's more money. And same with me. He's got the biker version and he's got the cowboy version now. And so now there's two different versions on his site of me. And so now people are like, oh, I can have this one, the retro one of him, or I could have the current one. Like it's just wild. Like I always tell him like just keep going at it. Just keep trying. Because he was just like anything. You suck at it. Like when I first started screen printing, man, it took my wife and I forever to figure it out, and we were awful at it. And he was getting so flustered because he was messing up so much, or the parts would break, or this or that. And I'm like, just keep trying, man. I was like, find an easier way to do it, and he kept thinking, and I was like, all right, I think this is the way I got to do it now. And like, now he's calling me every day. Like, I'm so happy my stuff's like going together smoother. Like everything's going the way it should. Like I'm not wasting so much product, this, that. And he's like, so like over the moon. And just watching even his evolution in that, like from beginning to now, and how different the figures look from the last line to this line. Like it's just so fun to watch his adventure, and just to be part of it. I'm thankful he even asked. He could have asked anybody, but he's asked me to be in the last line and this one.
It's amazing. You brought up the screen printing and the making the merchandise. How did you get into doing that?
That was another. So in wrestling, it's for some reason it's so hard to get things, like to get shirts, to get gear, to get boots, to get whatever. It is so hard to get somebody to either answer you or to get your stuff. Like, I had a set of gear made. I paid the guy, I'm not gonna say his name, paid him last year, and he's like, okay, I'll have your stuff done this date. You'll have it by this time. Cool. It took over a year to get my stuff. Of me messaging him like, where's my stuff? Where's my stuff? Like, and like trying to find a decent bootmaker. Like, is hard to find. So it's like all these. There's so many people that offer things, but it's so hard to get them. And I was getting merchant. I just started getting merchandise at the time. I was at a level where I felt confident selling stuff. But then, like, trying to even get shirts made was hard. So it's like, I'm just gonna do it myself. And we started with just a vinyl cutter and a heat press, and we just did simple logo shirts. And then when I started having my stuff set up at my table, people go, "Oh, where'd you get your stuff? Who made your stuff? It looks great." And I was like, "Well, I made it. Would you make us stuff?" And I'm like, "Ah, man, I was just doing this for me." And I was like, "Well, I guess." So I started making other people's stuff, but then, like, with anything, people want more detail. They want more whatever. So Lisa and I, my wife, okay, well, screen printing is the next thing. We got to get a screen printer. And we'll figure it out. Just like this thing. It took us a while to figure out this vinyl thing. Well, we'll figure this out. And we figured that out. We started pumping out higher quality, better stuff. People. It was more like word of mouth. Like, it was mostly Michigan, and then, like, then out of state people started seeing it, like, because I used to put my tag on everybody's shirt, so they knew it came from Face Geeked Apparel. Like the old WWE shirts have their little stamp on the corner, the
Yeah.
shirt. So I kind of mimicked it, and so then now my brand is on their stuff, and I gave like a little deal at the time, like, say, hey, if you let me put my stamp on your shirt, I'll take 50 cents off a shirt. Oh, sweet, I can save money. Cool, and I'd stamp their shirt. So other states started seeing the stamp, and going to our page. Hey, we want shirts too, and then it just started kind of like going crazy after that. And then working at Exodus, like, that helped me get the TV guys coming to me. So, like, I made Rhino shirts, I made EC3 shirts, I made Heath Slater shirts, I made Two Cold Scorpio stuff. I made Madman Fulton stuff. I almost got Trey Miguel to make his stuff. So it's been kind of fun to have these guys that I watch, or some of my heroes are coming to me like, hey, you know, we want you to make our stuff. And I'm like, I never thought, in a million years that I would be making stuff for, the guys I look up to, you know. I never
Absolutely.
I never dreamed it would be this. And then in a past life I was a chef forever, and COVID happened. And then Lisa and I talked about it, and we're like, I'm not gonna go back, because I was miserable. I brought work home with me. I was mad, angry, and it showed even in my wrestling. I was just angry, yelling at people all the time, and that's not me. And she said, because my boss called me back to go back, and she said, no, you're not going back. We're jumping into the screen printing thing right now. We're doing this. You're gonna be a full-time stay-at-home dad, and you're gonna screen print. And I'm like, all right, twist my wrist more, you know what I mean? And so ever since then, I haven't looked back. And wrestling, even though I'm not on TV or under contract, wrestling is paying my way to live.
Nice. It's cool to see. I mean, like you said, even though you're not on a network or a broadcast or television product, to be able to find a way to make wrestling supplement the income to live off of is cool, and it's rare in the independent level. Like, it's most guys are working their 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, plus wrestling on the weekends and sometime during the week. But to be able to find a way to, you know, bring in revenue another way through wrestling is almost ingenious. And I applaud you for being able to do that.
A lot of hard work, a lot of life lessons learned, but I mean, I'm happy with it, like, I'm happy where I'm at.
I love it. Sean, I got one more question and then I'll let you go. What would you say are some of the goals you'd like to accomplish going into 2026?
Um, well, everybody is like, um, one show recently was like, well, you're not getting any younger, you know what I mean? So like, and I realized that, you know, I'm gonna be 38 next week. So like, I would like to, I'm, you know, like the contract is the goal, right? But like to just be on one time, you know, like on TV once, like whether it's NWA is my dream. That's where I want to go. That's, you know, very much my style, my what I like to watch. So if I could get on there or Ring of Honor or MLW, even just once, you know, I'd be happy. You know, at this point, you know, but I want my goal is to get somewhere that my girls can see that I worked so hard to get to. You know, like that's like the lesson I keep telling them. It's like, you know, daddy's working really hard, you know, because I'm gone every weekend. Like, oh, you gotta go wrestling. I was like, one day it might pay off. It might, you know, but I want you guys to know that no matter how hard you work, you know, if you get where you want to go, you know, you've accomplished your goal. So, you know, I got a 6, a 4, and a 2-year-old, and I'm trying to teach them at that age just to keep working as hard in life to get where you want to go. So, like, if I even that goal, like teaching my girls how to be whatever they want to be, you know, the one tells me she wants to be an artist astronaut. You know what I mean? I want to be an astronaut that does art. Okay, well, you know, keep drawing and, you know, stay in school because being an astronaut's hard, you know, but you can do it. Just put your mind to it, you know. So, like, if they can see daddy do that, you know, and see him do what he wanted to do, I think that would be more of a goal than anything. It's just seeing them, you know, learn something.
Okay. I love it, Sean. Thank you. This was a great conversation. I hope to do another one.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This was a fun one.
I appreciate it. I try to keep it cool and calm and collected and have a nice time. So I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. We did it at the beginning of the broadcast, but just in case for some reason the fans weren't paying attention, scrolling through comments or whatever, would you like to shout out your social medias and let the fans know where they can see you one more time, even find some apparel and things like that?
Yeah, you can find me Facebook. I'm Sean Evans. Instagram. I'm Sean Evans 2025. Facecake Apparel is my merchandise link on Facebook and Instagram. And yeah, September's kind of sparse right now, but I will be. I'm not booked for Crossfire, but I'll be there helping and doing whatever I can. And I'm also doing their seminars. They're offering a Ken Anderson seminar. I don't know if there's spots left, and they're also offering a Ricky the Dragon Steamboat seminar, which for $50 for each. You know, I spent 50 on each. You know what I mean? You can't beat that. So
No.
I'm learning something while I'm down there. But yeah, you can usually catch me at Chaos Wrestling, Pure Pro Wrestling, and Super Shogun Wrestling are my more consistent ones in Michigan.
Perfect. Sean, with that said, thank you once again, and I will leave this at see you next time.
Later. Thank you.